Welcome to It's a Grand Life. Did you know that in the United States alone, 2.4 million kids are being raised by their grandparents or other family members other than mom or dad? 2.4 million. It's a Grand Life is a podcast for those grandparents and kinship caregivers who are committed to making a difference for those kids. Grand families are in every neighborhood, every city, tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your audio podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Hello, my name is Craig Nash. I'd like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And I just think we have a real special show here today. You're absolutely going to be blessed. This lady has been an inspiration to me and to countless others across the country. Our guest today is Jaia Peterson Lent, the Deputy Executive Director from Generations United. Now, before I introduce Jaia to you, I want to tell you a little bit about what this lady does at Generations United. She is the Deputy Executive Director, and she assists the executive director with leadership management, policy, fundraising, and operational issues. She leads GU's policy work, educating Congress on intergenerational issues, coordinating a diverse group of organizations serving on Generation United's policy committee. She oversees grassroots efforts, and she presents at national and international conferences. Not only that, she has received her Master's of Social Work from Syracuse University. She's a licensed social worker who has worked in Child Protective Services and refugee settlement and in many other capacities with individuals and families from a variety of cultural backgrounds. She's not a policy wonk. She's got boots on the ground for many years. And Jaia, we'd just like to welcome you to It's a Grand Life, and thank you for carving out time for us today.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us, we now know a little bit about your diverse activities throughout the day, but who is Jaia Peterson Lent?
Big question. It's never quite been posed to me like that before. Certainly currently in my role, I am deeply steeped in intergenerational work. That means both promoting intergenerational programs, which is the broader work of Generations United, promoting connections across generations, but also specifically on the advocacy front that's most relevant to this discussion, overseeing the work of our National Center on Grand Families, where we really advocate alongside and provide opportunities and support for grand families and their allies to advocate on behalf of policies that promote supports for them and protect them and their families. But where did my interest in this work come from?
Right.
Background. So I am the daughter of two ministers. And so grew up in a setting that really promoted the importance of helping people. And so from a young age, I think that was instilled in me. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college. Was the classic undecided when I first arrived on the college campus, but learned about social work shortly after being there and thought, one thing I know I want to do is help people. Right. And the more I learned and read about that, said, this is where I want to go. And so entered my vocational world from the social work lens, and eventually learned policy was the frame at which I wanted to do that social work. So headed to DC, and that's a short version of my journey.
Oh, that's so interesting. And so you've had that love your neighbor as yourself background with mom and dad both being ministers. That's really, that's just no wonder. It makes so much sense now. But so how did you land at Generations United?
So, when I first started in Child Protective Services,
Okay.
actually, so I started doing social work, kind of boots on the ground, working at a child welfare agency. And one of the first cases that I was sent out on was a case where it was referred from a hospital. The hospital social worker's sense was that this child could not safely go home to mom and dad. And so I went out and did an assessment, and it was actually one of the cases where it was quite clear that the child would not be able to go, directly to the care of the mother or father. And so I began earnestly looking for relatives. And in that journey, I found a relative, but then went on to promise that relative they would get the support that they needed, because in my social work training, I thought that was going to be the case,
Right.
and learned that that was not the case, and really felt awful afterwards that I had promised this relative that they would have the supports and they didn't have it. And so I think early on I thought something is wrong here. We need to do something about this, and saw that policy advocacy was the way that you could make meaningful change. And so had my eye towards going to do work in DC, went back to school, got my MSW at Syracuse University, where there was also a well-known public policy school, and just became interested in public policy. And through a connection there, met some folks in DC, got an internship there, and eventually was connected with Donna Butts at Generations United, and learned, wow, this is a group that does advocacy for kinship families. And I was just reminded back to that first story of social work, and I've been here since.
That is just so interesting. So it's amazing how you started one way and ended up over here at GU in policy. And then we absolutely need policy advocates because there's so much that needs to be done, as you know, behind the scenes. And one of the things I've really liked about being a grand voice is that you even invite us behind the scenes. We've been at the digital or the virtual White House on occasions for different policy revelations and what have you, and that's been just very interesting. But because so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the impact and how do you know I know GU is involved in so many things, and the data that comes out of Generations United is just terrific. But how do you know at the deputy executive level? How do you know if you are making an impact promoting the health and wellness of grand families?
Well, it's important to listen, and it's important to research and dig in and get a sense of what's happening. So I think one of the most valuable places that we get information is from our grand voices, of which you are one, Craig. So we can talk to programs, we can dig into research, but we want to hear directly from families that are being impacted from across the nation. And so we really are fortunate to hear routinely from our grand voices, of which there are 80 plus, representing
Right.
46 states and 12 tribes. And caregivers tell us what the realities are on the ground. So that is a key place for us to hear about impact and realities. In addition to that, we do kind of the wonky, nerdy stuff, right? Where we go and we do dig into what do policies say across the nation on the way that they're supporting kin families. Where are the programs across the country? What does the research say about the impact of these programs? Where do we need more research to show what's working and what isn't? So we take multiple approaches to get that information, and we have an annual State of Grand Families report where we look at what does the data say about how families are doing, and we look at one particular intersection of an issue each year. So it might be education, it might be housing. Of course, it was COVID-19 during the thick of that. So, it just depends on the issue.
So every year you'll take a different area to focus on and just look at any changes and trends in that space. And are you seeing the demographics change from as far as grand families and kinship caregivers across the country? Are they getting younger? Are they getting older? And
Well, a new report actually just came out from the Census Bureau looking at co-resident grandparents and grandchildren. So this report specifically looked at grandparents. It doesn't dig into the other relatives. I just want to be clear on that. This is where the data was. And what that report showed is, on the whole, the numbers of grandparents living with their grandchildren, that population is getting older. Now, so we have these older grandparents, and a portion of those, almost a third of those, are really raising those grandchildren, because they say that they are primarily responsible for those grandchildren, right? So we see that population on the whole is getting older, over 60. However, we as a nation, the population is getting older. So that kind of aligns with that. And so while that's important to know when we want to think about that, when we're doing advocacy and thinking about services, what are the unique challenges of those older relatives and how can we be serving with that lens? That does not tell the whole story of families, right? We also, census looks at grandparents raising grandchildren or grandparents living with grandchildren starting at age 30. So we know that there are some very young grandparents who are responsible for grandchildren, and what types of services they need and are going to connect to, where they're going to go for help, is going to be different than the 65, 70-year-old grandparents. So we want to see where the trends go. We want to be thoughtful of that, but we also need to know that that is not the whole story. Each family has a unique experience, and we need to be thoughtful and digging into that data in really specific ways, disaggregate it by race, by locality, by geography. All of those things are important to really serve families in all the ways that they need.
Well, that's just absolutely great. Now, one of the things that is so terrific about Generations United is, I think, the Grand Voices. I think that is just a brilliant strategy. Now, how did the Grand Voices come into being?
So since Generations United established our National Center on Grand Families, we have informally talked to caregivers about the realities of their day-to-day experiences. And we really, have been thoughtful about having those experiences drive our advocacy and our resource creation and work. But back in 2014, we thought we need to formalize this. This is just a very informal way of doing it, and we need to be really thoughtful. So we started with 5 caregivers, and just grew it every year. And then we really recognized we have to be intentional about recruiting in a way that is really representative of the demographics that are out there. So then we thought, let's be intentional about recruiting around what the demographics say about race, geography, et cetera, ages of kids, all of that. So we try to have really diverse representation of Grand Voices. And now we are 80 plus strong, representing 46 states and 12 tribes.
It's just amazing. So how do you find and keep the Grand Voices so motivated? These are volunteers. And I mean, it's not unusual to talk to Gail Engel in Colorado and find her driving across the state to advocate for grand families, or Bob Rubel in California is hopping on a plane to go to Sacramento to advocate. And I said, how do you do that with volunteers? That's amazing.
I would love to take credit for it, but I would say that Grand Voices are motivated by their experiences and their passion for helping others like them. I really believe that. And we try to provide a platform for them to connect with each other, support them in raising their voices to do advocacy that they very much already want to do. Right. But they, this is an incredible group of people who have faced just challenges that have felt insurmountable at times, and they have, surmounted those challenges and want to make it easier for others so that others don't have to go through what they do. And we just find ways to build connections and open doors for them to raise their voices in those settings where decision makers need to hear them to make policy decisions that are going to be most helpful.
And you've also gotten involved at the state level, haven't you, on different occasions when there's an initiative perhaps in California that needs to be addressed? Maybe you'll team up with Bob or some of the Grand Voices on a statewide basis, and that's so helpful, I would think.
So we have what is called our Grand Families and Kinship Support Network, which is a national technical assistance center that is doing that technical assistance, which is a term really used for providing, resources, individualized or group help to different programs around the country, for example. And so we really love when we can to go and provide individual help to programs to learn from other, so a program in Washington can learn from one in New York or vice versa, so that they're not reinventing the wheel. So we do a lot of work around that. On the advocacy front, we have been invited to help with some local advocacy, but our role in that front tends to be really building connections so that what's happening in one state can inform what's happening in another state. It's hard for a national organization to know all of the nuances locally.
Right.
So we do a lot of work about making local connections and connecting, people from across the country to learn from each other. There's no substitute for that.
Absolutely. But that makes so much sense. What is working in California may work in Colorado and Louisiana, and it's great to share those things. The other things you guys do really, really well, and because I'm really kind of a newbie at this whole Grand Voice situation, is you train us. You'll have meetings and you'll talk about this is how you advocate, and this is how you present your story, and what's really compelling is your situation and your story and your passion, and I find that so helpful, and also your team. You have a very diverse team that seems to work seamlessly, and if we could just get the whole country to work like your team, I think we'd be so far ahead of the game. But that was done intentionally, right? We've got a wonderful group of folks.
Certainly. So our team is great. We have people that come from backgrounds in direct service. We have, a gentleman who worked with one of the first housing developments specifically designed for grandparents and other relatives raising children. Then we have some members of our Grand Voices network who have come on staff and are in roles from, supporting other Grand Voices to helping to run peer collaborative and program development work. And so we really believe that we want to hire and engage people that have been doing the work on the ground and have lived experience in grand families as well. So we have both caregivers and we have young people that have been raised by grandparents, great grandparents, in addition to those that just have social work backgrounds or other backgrounds doing this work. And I really think you need a diverse team in that way. That's the best combination are people that bring different backgrounds, skill sets, and knowledge.
100% agree with that. So what would you say, Jaia, is your greatest success at Generations United?
Two things that I'm really particularly proud of. One is the policy advocacy successes, and I'm not going to point to one because there have been many, but there have been a number of child welfare reform bills that have happened over the 23 years I have been here. And so we've done things from requiring that child welfare agencies look first to relatives, give notice to relatives when a child can't remain in their parents' care, investments in kinship navigator programs for information and referral, some things to help address licensing barriers to relatives. So those kinds of things have come out of child welfare reform. And then on the other end of the age spectrum, one of the early successes in early 2000s was the establishment of the National Family Caregiver Support Program, which was established really to help people caring for older relatives who have increasing care needs. And we advocated that grandparents who are caregivers, who are givers of care, not just receivers of care, should be part of that support. And so as a result of that, grand families are included in aging services that are available around the country. And so that's another, big policy success. Those are policy successes. I would say on the other side of, what I'm most proud of is certainly engaging Grand Voices and really knowing that the work we are doing is driven by and informed by people that are living it every day.
Outstanding. That is so true. And now, what are the three things you wish you knew when you started working with grand families?
I think when I started working, I wish that from the beginning, we had a model where our advocacy was based in listening first. I think we did the research. I think we talked to other professionals, but we weren't formally engaged in a model that listened to the families from the beginning. And we are, the next phase of this work is that we have this amazing group of caregivers, but we do not have a formal model yet to be listening to young people who have been raised in grand families. And so I think there's work to be done there, because that's another perspective. We need to be listening to young voices. And there are groups out there for young people in foster care, which may include people who are in kinship foster care. But there is not an existing group for young people raised in grand families outside of the foster care system. And so that's really something that we're exploring, developing.
That makes so much sense. And so you're talking, when you're talking about listening first, that's almost like a Stephen Covey model, right? Seek first, understand before being understood, and from his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But it all starts with listening, and you folks do that very, very well. And the idea of listening to young voices, I'm thinking of my own granddaughter. That I would love that if she had a group of peers that she could gather and share her story and learn from others and help us as grandparents to do a better job. That's because we try to listen, but sometimes we're not really that good at it. But at Generations United, you folks really specialize in listening to your grand voices and the whole situation going on in Washington, being involved from a policy standpoint. You got to have your ears to the ground all the time, and then you help us to learn to do a better job. And Jaia, I just really appreciate the work that you're doing and your team, and it's just a privilege to be part of the Grand Voices and Generations United. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to come back next week and talk about the mission and vision of Generations United and some of the boots on the ground efforts that you folks are doing to make these results a reality. So thanks for being our guest today, and look forward to seeing you next week on It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.